Everything you know about self-mastery is wrong. Okay, relax. Hyperbole sells. You know as well as I'm not being entirely serious. But a lot of that is true. So we're gonna go over a few ways that most of us try to improve ourselves and why those are actually the wrong ways. And I have been there, so this is from personal experience, as well as just what the data tell us is the correct approach. Before we get into today's video, of course, I wanna welcome you to Hack That Habit, where our channel is focused on helping you live more effectively. Now, the point of living effectively is so that you can actually execute on your ideas, realize your intentions, okay? And that is the hardest thing to do in this life, at least as I have found. So if you're having trouble with that as well, this might be a great place for you to come and learn and also share what you have learned with others. We have a pretty cool community here that we're getting started. So if you want to be a part of that, go ahead and subscribe, and I appreciate it. What is the first approach most of us take? Well, that is the mind over matter, the willpower based, just do it of the day. And I get that that's a beautiful tagline and it sells a bunch of shoes and clothes and all of that stuff. But what they're really selling, if that company, is the aspiration, the beautiful potential becoming realized. But that as advice actually isn't helpful. I was actually just talking to my mom today, and she was giving me a rundown of some people's advice that they gave her. And I stopped her. I was like, Mom, look, if anyone tells you what to do without backing it up or following it up with the how to make that happen, then just don't listen, because the what is the super easy part. I know what to do to be successful. I know what to do to become a professional skateboarder or best-selling author or professional cook, whatever it might be. The what is really simple. Now, if they can give you the why behind the what, that's a little bit better, but even better, and what we really focus on here, is the how, right? How are you actually going to make that what a reality? Because if you can't give that advice, then it's really useless. The mechanism for making something is the underlying goal. That's where the money really comes from. It doesn't have to be money, but you know what I mean. But before I knock this too hard, I do want to give it some credit, okay? Willpower is a great resource that we have a finite amount of, and how we use it really determines how we live our lives. Most of us understand that time is our most limited resource, and we'll get to that next. But it really isn't, okay? Willpower is actually this more fundamental bottleneck to us living out the things that we want to, or behaving the way that we intend to. And once we understand that, then really how we use our willpower has an inordinate impact on the way that we live our life, the way that we spend our time. So willpower is a beautiful resource that we need to focus on, but most of us operate as if we have an inner David Goggins all the time. If you don't know who that is, look him up. He's a freaking beast. But that really isn't helpful to the majority of people. I get that if you're mindset oriented and you think, I'm gonna achieve this regardless of what happens, beautiful. If that works for you, by all means. I'm just under the impression that not all of us have that inner Goggins or inner Tony Robbins type of ability. So let's actually use the mindset that will help most of us. There's a beautiful quote that I think Jim Rohn has. He basically says that willpower is what gets us started, habits are what keep us going. This is a great approach because it doesn't use the work hard, not smart mentality. It says, hey, let's work hard so that we can work smart. And that is what we are all about here. So using your willpower to just do it is a necessary step, but it's not the only step. I think many of us are focused on just do it, willpower, mindset over everything, we can do it, all of that type of mind over matter madness that is not gonna actually allow us to get the long-term success that we're after. It may last for a weekend, but it is not going to help you become who you want to be on the whole. It might help you get a project done or any weekend-based sprint, but when it comes to the year after year after year after decade of a life, of a process, it's not the only way to behave the way you intend to, right? That is, and we've gone over this before, but behavior is really this middle ground where intention plus willpower can get you there. But the other way is actually a lot smarter, and what we're gonna go over at the end, which is habit plus cue can also lead to behavior. And it doesn't require that limited resource of willpower. So understanding that there's not just that one perpetual step of willpower, we can actually free up a lot of behavior for us to behave. If we want long-term success, let's look at learning. I think most of us do this, whether it's in high school, college, whatever. If you have a test coming up, you probably cram the weekend before. And that is really shit when it comes to long-term learning and being able to utilize that knowledge, because it comes in, it stays there for a little bit, the test, and then it goes out. So if we want this longer-term sustainable approach to progress and success in multiple different areas, then we need a different type of approach and not just this vertical, I'm gonna will it into existence and then crash. All right, moving on to the next terrible way to become your best self is time management. Now, first, of course, look, if you're a doctor or a lawyer and you have these 6-minute intervals of meetings and all that crap, of course you have to manage your time. But what I'm here to say is that most of us are not at that state where managing your time is the thing that's holding you back. In other words, it's really easy to plan out your day in 5-minute increments if you really want to, in a perfect way, right? You could plan your perfect work day or perfect weekend day pretty easily in maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes. But unless you execute on that plan, it's not gonna benefit you. And unless you're getting that benefit, it's not gonna do you any good, right? There's no point to plan a perfect day if you can't execute it. So what's happening? And actually, let me back up, because this is really deep core to who I am. And one of the best mistakes that I made was trying to plan my day in terms of time. And I actually went a little step further. I tried to evaluate what different types of time expenditure really were. So relationships were really high up, meditating was really high up, physical exercise was high up, reading was high up. And these all had different granular differences between them so that I could have some sort of priority in a way, even though it was imperfect. But what this allowed me to do was spend my time effectively, or know how to spend my time effectively, but I still wasn't doing it. And you can look, maybe I'll put up some of the spreadsheets here, but it would be like a good day, another good day, and then nothing, or a week of greatness, and then the rest of the month was shit. What this really caused me to do was look at why we aren't able, or at least why I wasn't able to behave the way I intended to, right? I had these beautiful intentions, but I wasn't executing on them. So why wasn't I? If I was planning it out perfectly, why wasn't it happening? And after going down the rabbit hole of human behavior and understanding why we do what we do, all the different reasons why that might be, maybe not all, but a lot of them, what came to my attention was that time is actually not this most limited, most important resource that most of us think it is, because it's fleeting and it's non-renewable and all of these things. But when it comes to behaving the way we intend to, time is actually irrelevant. Yeah, maybe the time of day based on our circadian rhythms and all that shit might help, but in reality, the willpower we have built up or the habits we have built up, those are the biggest determinants of what we actually do, not what time it is or how much time we have left. And when you can reshape and reframe your day, not in terms of what's the time, but what is the available willpower, or where are my habits in this day, it becomes a lot more manageable, because habits and willpower are how you execute on a plan. They're how you effectively behave the way you intend to, as opposed to an arbitrary amount of time in a day. Or I'm going to do this project from 1 to 3 or 3 to 4, whatever. If you can really fully control your own schedule, then using time blocks really isn't helpful if you don't have the resources to be able to execute that plan. To make it really clear, here's what most people do. They make a day, let's say 8 hours of sleep, so there's 16 hours remaining. They plan out those 16 hours as if they had full conscious, full focus, full willpower ability during those 16 hours. But in reality, and this is really loose numbers based on some diary studies, but let's say we have 10 actual hours of willpower. Now, depending on how you sleep and how you eat, all this stuff, your willpower hours will be affected, right? But let's say there's more or less 10, just for argument's sake and simplicity. If you plan out 16 hours of willpower, but you only have 10 available, what are you gonna do? And if you expect that you're gonna do 16 and you only do 10, you're gonna be pretty mad, right? And it's gonna be this cycle of, why can't I do this? I'm just gonna try harder, and the trying harder becomes this vicious cycle of relying on coffee and other things that are gonna lead to burnout. And if you can't, again, have that long-term sustainable path towards progress, you're not going to be able to succeed the way you want to. Okay, so the first understanding of the time, the 16 hours, is not what limits us, right? We all spend time doing things that we don't really want to or don't really care about. Netflix is super easy to do. Social media, it's a few hours a day in the US for every single person. Well, maybe not every single person, I'll take that back. But I think it's a few hours a day for maybe 18 to 40 something, right? And that is just insane when people try to use the argument, I don't have enough time, and yet they spend time doing shit. It's because we don't have the available willpower or habits to back it up. One more bad way to achieve self-mastery before we get to what I think is the right way. And this bad way is to copy someone else. Now, again, I'm gonna lead with what some good aspects of copying someone are, because there are some really beneficial ways that we can learn from other people. And I think mindsets and life strategies are best when we can kind of tease them apart from others and restitch them, make them our own. Maybe it all comes from within, maybe not, but the better way to go about creating a life path for yourself is learning from other people, taking from them what you really like, and getting rid of the stuff that you don't. Okay, so one thing that we don't really realize is that oftentimes when we look at successful people, we're already looking at what we admire about them, and we're focusing on that. We're using that, and the halo effect, a cognitive bias, takes over and makes us think that all these other parts of their life are actually going really well. So if you can use the awareness to tease apart what is working for them, what is not, the more you know them, right, the more intimate your connection, the better off you're gonna be able to do this. So if it's some famous person, really only try to take one thing or two things if you can, because the more you don't know about them, the harder it is to take the full package. Now, move that to the person that is really close to you. Everyone's gonna have different personal battles, different interior differences that are gonna change the way that they view things or the way that they approach things. So understanding that you're not the same as everyone else and not to compare yourself to these other people is really gonna help you move forward and become who you wanna be. So that is all to say that it's not as easy as copy and paste. Okay, the mechanism might be relatively similar for a lot of people in terms of behavior, but the interior mindset, the approach, the process for going after the things that you want is gonna be really customized, really individual when it comes down to the nuances of your life, your apartment or your home or your city or state or country, the laws that you abide by or the internet access you have. All of these things are gonna play some role in the way that you approach becoming a better you. So understanding that the copy and paste formula is not gonna translate as well as you'd like. Everyone's got a different canvas to paint on. So even if you try to mimic the paint exactly, it's gonna turn out a little bit differently. So you have to manipulate it in a way that's gonna best benefit you. All right, now let's move on to what I think is the way to self-mastery. Now, if we look at the three things we just listed, willpower, time management, copying someone else, there's a lot to take from these. And I hope that I've kind of gone over those well enough there. But what we really want to do is understand who we are, who we want to become, and the path to get there, right? What are the behavioral differences? What's the personality difference, the value difference of us to that future self? And once we have that laid out, that's the foundation. The next thing we need to do is figure out how. What's the mechanism for making that become a reality? Because we need to create some sort of momentum. And what we're trying to do right now is, if we're focused on willpower alone or mind over matter, we're trying to drive from LA to San Diego on an empty tank of gas, because we don't realize that that's actually not our resource that we're trying to use. We're trying to fill our gas tank with time when in reality we need fuel, okay? And willpower is that fuel, but it has a limit. And most of us think the mind over matter, the I can do anything, is the way to get there. And I get that there are some studies with Dr. Carol S. Dweck, wonderful author and researcher behind the great book Mindset, where if you believe a certain thing regarding willpower specifically, if I believe I have a limitless capacity for it, in some cases it does show up. But what I'm here to tell you is maybe that's true, maybe it works for you, but unless it works on a day-to-day basis, then it's not as reliable as you want it to be, right? If it only works for you 2 out of 7 days, then it's probably worth pursuing a different path. And that's what I like to use it as, is willpower is kind of for that weekend or that project that you really want to get done, or the initial grit to create some momentum to go from 0 to 1. But in order to go from 1 to N and have this sustainable progress, we need to be using that to create the habits that are going to benefit us. Because again, habits, we can acquire behavior or achieve behaviors from habits plus the cues, right? The context dependent understanding of, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and it kind of starts that behavior in motion. That's going to be the most effective way for us to use our limiting resource, right? Time is not our bottleneck, okay? If we have 16 hours, but only 10 of them have willpower, then we're operating incorrectly if we try to plan out the 16. Now we can if we have the right 6 hours of habits built up, and again, these are super arbitrary numbers or imperfect numbers, but it comes down to not time, but our combination of habits plus willpower. Okay, so sleep and eating and all that stuff go towards your willpower, and the habits you have built up can be a byproduct of just behavior and unintentional motion, or it can be a really deliberate way that you choose to improve your life. And that's what we really like to focus on here, because habits are those behaviors that are going to happen on an ongoing basis that don't require that limited willpower to do, only to be created. So if you want to be a little bit smarter, a little bit more deliberate, and get higher impact out of that limited bottleneck willpower, then go ahead and check the link in the description, because we're going to walk you through how to use that more effectively, maybe what to use it on specifically. But if you already have that figured out, then we're going to help you put that into action. Create a plan that is based around your limited resource and how to get more out of it on an ongoing basis. That's not to say that you can't rely on willpower in certain times of need, or that you can't have an unstoppable mindset. But if you're already trying that and you're not operating like David Goggins or Tony Robbins or those great types of willpower based people, then you're not actually doing yourself any benefit. It's time to take an alternative approach. Understand that, hey, I might not have that unshakable mentality that I thought, but I can use what unshakable mentality I do have to create the right habits for me to get there. They're just different ways of getting to the same result. And if you're stuck beating your head against the wall, trying to make yourself do the thing you don't really want to, then maybe it's time to take a step back and reevaluate your approach to making it become a reality. So if you're ready to do that and admit that maybe my strategy right now could use a little tweaking, go ahead and click that link in the description, and we'll see you in there.